Beautiful people, thank you for joining us. I can see that the chat room's starting to slowly fill up. That's great. Welcome to our Chi transmission / meditation, whatever you want to call it. And I think right now is the perfect time to be running one of these. We haven't done one for quite some time actually, and we wanted to do one last week, but there was some pretty weird circumstances that played out to prevent us from doing it, or maybe for us to do it tonight at the right time, at the right moment. Good to see all your faces. If you want to chuck your cameras on for a little while, feel free to do so. Have a look at all the lovely smiling heads. Tonight we're going to go deep. We're going to talk about what's coming up at the moment, what's going on in the world at the moment, and how that correlates to us on, I guess you could say, the spiritual level, because everything is interconnected. I'm personally going through some very interesting times in the last 6 months, a lot of pressure, and I think my spiritual journey maybe took a backseat for a while. And the last couple of weeks, it's been really clear to me that it's time to step back into the practices and all the things that keep us grounded and remaining focused in this multidimensional war which we're in. This is a reality we're living in that is connected to other realities, as you all know. You've all had experiences and circumstances where you felt a presence, or you've had a sign or a symbol or something that's led you somewhere, or you've worked in a room and just felt something, person's energy. That's actual normal stuff for us. But in this Western world and the matrix system we're in, our abilities have been a little bit down-tuned. And what this Chi transmission does, this meditation, it actually activates our extrasensory abilities, and it allows us to connect more deeply and be more understanding and to be able to navigate this realm much more easily. And there's a couple of different ways that this happens, and Jake's going to get right into how this happens, but you can play around on the astral realms and get involved in all the games and all the scenarios that are happening. And essentially, when you're focusing on something, you are creating it. That's the one thing we know about this world and quantum entanglement. Science is proving it now, We are the creator of this reality. We're not God per se, but there's a piece of God in us. And we are connected to the higher realms. And we've got to be very careful what we're focusing on. Very, very careful, especially at this point, because we're in a time of magic right now. This is the time where what you're creating is happening very quickly, as you all know. We have some, crazy stuff happening on the 3D over in Palestine and Israel, and the big divide which is going on globally now because of this. There's a light that's been shined into what's been happening for the last 50 or 70 years there. But this type of behavior and this type of games is happening in a whole bunch of other countries right now, in Africa and places all around the world. It's just, is our attention focused on it? Do we realize it's happening? What are we doing to change it? Now, the two ways you can do this is, like I said, you can enter into the astral realms and play around in there and be part of all the games and trickery, or you can sit comfortably in your living room and raise your internal frequency. And you don't need to know the games and the tricks that are going on out there. All you need to know is that you're actually raising the frequency of yourself and all the people around you and your ecosystem connected with Mother Earth. And we're avoiding these timelines that are unsavory. So that's a much easier way and a much easier approach to create change in this world. Yes, we're here in the 3D to live, to do things, to experience, to be in relationships and things like that, because they're the most pressuring things that basically hold the mirror up. Getting in a relationship, or, spending time with family, business, money, all these things are connected to the spiritual journey, because everything we do on this planet is a spiritual journey. If you're here and you're breathing, you're in the right place at the right time. You can't say, I should have done this. Oh, when I was younger, I should have done that. Should have done this. Come on. We're all here, right? We're all here. It's just how present we are being in this moment. Are we appreciating everything? Sometimes it takes really tough circumstances in our lives for us to appreciate things that are going on. I'm going through a process at the moment where my beautiful dog, he's getting quite old now. I would say he's on his last legs. I've spent every minute with him for 13 and a half years, And I'm not even sure what my life will look like without him, because I've literally spent every minute with him for 13.5 years. I'm never lonely, never by myself. Always got my dog. Go to the shops, go for a swim, protest, comes to all the meditation classes we used to run, comes to the gym with me, traveled around the country for 10 years in my bus. And he's been almost like a security blanket. And in the last probably 6 weeks, I think I've cried more than I have in the last 20 years. And I realize that emotional release that's been happening, it's like a tap that's being undone. And there's so many other things that I haven't cried, or I've suppressed my emotions and pushed things down, that are now surfacing and coming out as well. So it's been a very challenging 6 weeks. And it's also making me cherish every single moment with this dog. And that's how we should be with every single moment of our lives, not just other people's lives and experiences, but our lives. It should be really, really cherished. And I think sometimes when a civilization is going into a state of slumber, things happen in the world which forces us to jump back onto the spiritual journey, because you realize that money, fame, chasing businesses or jobs or whatever it is, like it's fulfilling for a while. And then ultimately, when you're stripped back bare, or when you have a life-threatening illness, or you lose something close to you, that's when you really realize that the most important things you have on this planet is your actions, your energy, the way you show up, and all the good deeds and things you've done in the world, how many people you've helped. Because one day we're going to look back when we're old, when we're laying there, we're going to be like, what were the things that I did on this planet when I came and I lived here for my experience? Like, what did I like? What did I enjoy? What was my legacy? You know, what was I known for? And they're the things that, if we think about them now, it keeps us in the present moment of being better people with more integrity, more morals, more connectivity to all things, and more understanding to other people's problems that they're going through. It's very easy to dismiss other people's problems because it might not be our problem. So we don't fully grasp and understand it. But for them, it's a really big thing. And for you, it may not be, but then something else for you is just as big. And they're like, what's that about? And that's a whole level of consciousness. This is all connected to consciousness. So what we're doing tonight is effectively, we're going to be clearing our space, clearing our field, getting off the attachments, getting all the things that are allowing our auric field to be opened and we're accessed. And these things are happening every day in this world we live in. Not just the physical with the food, the water, the air, but the bombardment of the news, the TV, the social media, this scrolling, and the instant gratification, the dopamine hit. You know, it's wild. We are completely addicted to our phones. And I think the more human we can be, the more we can access our own inner medicine, our own inner standing, and remain grounded and try not to be controlled by the technology. I think that's a really, really important thing. And raising your internal frequency the way we're going to do tonight, which you're all going to feel, by the way. If you've never done this tonight, this is going to be a very profound experience for you. Like, I can guarantee you that you're going to feel things tonight that you wouldn't feel meditating by yourself, not only because of the group energy and all the people in here, but Jake's been doing this for over 15 years. I've been doing his classes for about the same time. And I've literally stood in the class with him before when he turns the chi on many times, and the room just becomes hot and sticky in minutes. You know, it's a very, very tangible thing. So what's happening is essentially he's been doing this for so long that when you first start, you might have like a little tube of energy coming through. You might feel a little trickle coming through your body. You might feel rejuvenated and good. But the more you do it, this energy source starts getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and eventually becomes like a waterfall pouring over your head. And your meditation and your consciousness level starts skyrocketing up. And a 1 hour meditation is equivalent to a few years ago of you doing, say, 10 hours. So in this class today, we're getting shotgunned onto a higher realm, I guess you could call it, or a higher frequency band. And we get to experience what it's like to be in that frequency band where Jake's operating at all the time, doing the years and years of chi transmission he's been doing. So if someone was to charge for this, and people do, they charge massive money on the internet for these things. And Jake's one of the best people out there. I guarantee I've been in the realm for a long time. So yeah, everyone should be really, really excited and pleased to have this session with Jake. And I'll introduce him and bring him on. Beautiful man. Like I said, someone I've been spent a lot of time with over the last 15 years. We've been working together for a very long time. Lots of these transmissions, lots of meditations, lots of classes, and a dude that I cannot fault him. I've seen him go through tough times, and he's just been a rock and a soldier and pushed through. And this is his life. He's given up his life to create this, and he's got incredible courses that are nearly finished. There's some of the ones he's been building for a long time, and they're going to be released soon. So I really feel like once these courses come out, this is going to be a very, very good framework for people to jump onto to essentially change their reality. And the people who do this work, I know lots of people who have done it and stuck by it and are still doing it. Their life has gone from black and white. It is absolutely unfathomable, the difference in these people's lives, the glowing of their eyes, their skin, their energy, the world they've created around them from doing this work. So the proof really is in the pudding. And thanks, Jake, for organising this presentation. And I think, this is going to be a really special night and a timely time to do it with so much craziness going on in the world right now. We can all feel the pressure. There's days where we wake up and we're just like, don't want to get out of bed. I get it, and this is why, and this is when we need to double down on our work. On those days we're feeling terrible through the retrogrades, the full moons, and just the days where something's happening, like you can feel it. We can all feel it, whether it's organic or whether it's an artificial frequency or something. I've had a lot of people message me about the last few days this week or last week that everyone had crazy nightmares and woke up tired and just really horrible dreams. It's happening to all of us. So we are in a time of magic, and magic is energy, and the more energy you hold, the more you can direct it into the things that you want to create. So this is what we're doing tonight. Welcome, and thank you for coming. My name's Nate Max, and I'll bring Jake Soul on. And Justin's has said in the comment section, I can attest to this work with the consistency of this work. So yeah, Justin's a person who's stuck by it, and he's a brilliant human, So thanks, Jake.
All right there. Can everybody confirm you're able to see me there?
Yep, and we can hear you.
Coming through clear? All right, very good. So as always, thank you very much, Nate, for that impeccable introduction. I'm always amazed at how well tuned in Nate is with what I'm about to present. He hasn't actually seen the presentation. I've given him a couple of indications of what I'll be talking about, but he manages to reverse it in a few concise words every time. And if you come back to his initial talk at the beginning of these presentations, you'll realize there's actually a lot more packaged in there than is conveyed to your mind initially. And that's because you can only say a certain amount of things with words. But apparently a picture paints 1,000 words, doesn't it? So this is why I'm going to be bringing some pictures to this as well, to this knowledge, and it will really reinforce what Nate just outlined. So another thing is it'll be good to have a drink of water with you. Water is the liquid crystal of the body. It's about 70%, isn't it? We understand it's important for health and bodily processes and so forth, but what a lot of people don't realize is it's actually the medium through which light is accreted into the body as well. It's the reason it's a liquid crystal, right? It brings light into the system. So we're going to be building the light over the course of this presentation, and that's a concept called tapasya in yoga. It's really a concept of concentration. And this is the key to advancing our system and regenerating our genetic code. So say, for example, you turn on the element. Water starts off in its cool, usual room temperature fashion, but it gradually and progressively heats up, doesn't it? And that's because energy is flowing through via conduction from the element into the water, and it's transferring energy, isn't it? So in like fashion, if you remain centered, still, and present throughout this presentation, if you breathe particularly, if you can undertake the Kriya Pranayama technique that is introduced in the lightning path and via the various schools of yoga, this is a very effective way to bring this energy into your body. And by the end of the presentation, we will have reached a different level of vibration. You will have moved through energetic transmutations, released a lot of blockages, and you will have ultimately brought yourself to a much higher level of functioning, as you'll discover over the coming days and weeks. All right, so we're going to get underway here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove the video so I don't distract from the presentation there. And we'll get underway. All right, feel welcome to place your comments in the chat box. I'm sure Nate will be able to address those. I'll look at it from time to time, but mostly I'll have my attention on the presentation itself. There's quite a bit to get through. I'm going to begin off with some basic concepts, some neuroscience concepts. I'm going to be talking about the physiology of the body. And I really like to keep this sort of information grounded in science because it's what we can currently relate to. So, of course, as a race, as a maturing civilization, we don't know everything about the universe. There's other races that do. So it's useful to be able to integrate what we currently know, our current understanding, which is very little. We're still just stuck on one little planet, aren't we? And there's countless planets in the universe. So we have to humble ourselves to recognize that there is much higher knowledge. And if we want to discover that and integrate that, we'll need to keep open minds, won't we? So having said that, let's get underway. And I'll just briefly cover what we're going to go through tonight. So first of all, the title of the webinar, it indicates multidimensional, isn't it? So what is a multidimensional? What is multidimensional war? What does that really mean? So I'm going to be going through that. I'm going to talk about spatial dimensions, which is sort of relatable to most people, although they probably haven't thought about how they come about. Dimensions of mind starts to get a little bit less tangible, although they are interrelated, and I'm going to explain that as we continue. I'm going to talk about dimensional fields, and you'll be able to see and understand as we go through this how these three actually connect and are one and the same thing, really. After that, I'm going to go through the levels of identity that relate specifically to you. This is your anatomy, your consciousness, and the levels that are beyond the present level of conscious awareness that we currently embody. I'm going to be talking about the levels of influence, and I've just noticed someone said they've lost the connection and aren't able to, is that you're not able to hear the sounds cut off? Can anybody else just confirm?
No, yours is good, Jake. Keep going. She's had problems before. I'll keep my eye on the chat group. You just go through the presentation. Yours is clear.
So this is, having gone through that basic construct, it gives us something to look at, levels of influence. And this is what I'm really wanting to talk about tonight, because it's so incredibly important. And so few people really get this. So few people understand this. And so as a result of not understanding it, well, if you're ignorant of something, then you can't do anything about it, can you? So that necessarily makes someone a victim. If they're not aware and they can't do anything about it, then they're victimized by that lack of knowledge, aren't they? So this is very empowering, and it really takes some time to get this. It's taken me many years to get this. I've had to work it out the hard way. So after that, I'm going to talk about how you can take control of your destiny, what knowledge and skills are required to do that. I'm going to share a bit of knowledge about your multidimensional anatomy so that I can further explain how this energy field clearing and activation takes place that we'll participate in. So there'll be a live, a practical experience toward the end of the webinar there. And then at the end, as I usually do, I'll make a special offer for those that would like to continue with some of this work. I'll make it easier for you to enter into that. We'll finish with a meditation for those troopers that really want to stay on till the end, all right? So I hope you've got your water, and I hope you're ready to go, because we're going to get into it, and we're going to move pretty fast. So, what is multidimensional? Now, obviously, this is what we can all relate to in terms of physical things, spatial dimensions, right? Walking along the road, you have the option of going forward and backward, don't you? You have the option of going side to side. You have the option of going up and down, and any combination of those vectors. Basically, that's the three different directions that you can take, or a combination of the three. You're in a three-dimensional holographic world. I'll explain a little more about why that's the case, or how that's the case shortly. And that gives you an experiential zone through which you can move. Now, gamers understand this quite well because they are literally living with their mind in a light field, a hologram, although it's projected onto a two-dimensional screen. It's done in such a way that they feel that they're involved in a three-dimensional real reality, especially now that we have, enhancements in sound, and it makes it seem like so much of a real experience. But that's the reality of the real world, as it were, as it's a three-dimensional hologram constructed of light that's been lowered in vibration into what we would call material reality or physical matter. All right, so as we walk through the world, the majority of people, they are completely unaware of this. They are completely unaware of how the world is coming into being. They don't know who they are. And as a result, they are trapped within a physical mind that is enslaved to just a sensory bandwidth of perception. And as a result of that, they are completely ingrained into the various sensory temptations and distractions that are actually draining their life force and causing a gradual degeneration of their form. Now, how can I justify that? Well, you can just look at the health statistics. You can pull them up from any governmental website, and you'll see that there's a rising in obesity, there's a rising in heart disease, a rising in cancers, and all of these mortalities. It's a continual rise. Now, why is that the case? You've got to think about that. It obviously means that the human system is gradually degrading and becoming less functional. It's becoming increasingly diseased. And as you'll come to see through this presentation, there's a very simple reason for that. There is a reason why the system's degrading, and if we don't get on top of it, it'll continue to degrade, and then you end up one of these unfortunate old people in a rest home that's being forced vaccinated, forced fed drugs, treated badly, abused, hit, scolded, etc., because you're being dealt with people that really don't want to be there. They don't want to be dealing with old miserable people who are sick, and they get frustrated, so they have a horrible end to their life, and that's certainly not where we want to end up being, is it? So the other aspect of this world that we live in is there's actually nature, isn't it? That was there originally. That was always there. The modern cities that we have, that I just showed in the previous slide there, big massive buildings and the concrete jungle, this is a relatively new thing, isn't it? Even if we go back a couple of thousand years, even 5,000 years, let's say 10,000 years to the beginnings of the modern civilization, this this is nothing compared to how long nature has been here in terms of billions of years. So we are coexisting with a natural hologram made of nature, the sun and the earth, and a relatively unnatural hologram that's made up of man-made constructs, isn't it? And the moment you get men involved, apparently, things start to go a little sour after a short period of time. So let's take a look at the dimensions of mind now. So here's our human being, and here's our brain. And now we're going to go into a little bit of neuroscience here. So we'll zoom into the brain here, and inside the brain, we have these constructs that are referred to as neurological networks. So I'm just going to go ahead and give information as if you're a beginner. If you don't know, not everybody's studied neuroscience or anatomy and physiology, so I'm going to briefly cover this for those that are aware of these things. Press on, I'm sure you'll get something valuable as we continue here. So what we just looked at there are networks of brain cells, and I'm going to try and get my little cursor going here. Here's a neuron, right? And that's a single neuron, that's a brain cell. Now, these neurons, you'll see that the little arms that come off them, they're referred to as dendrites. They connect themselves to the other neurons. Now, who here in the audience, for example, are students of Joe Dispenza? Have we got any hands up there in the field? I'm expecting there's probably going to be a few. All right, so Michelle's saying, I watch him a lot. Yes, brother, yes. Okay, so one of the things that you hear, lots of people are students of these, love his work, says Paula. Awesome teacher, says Gabby. So one of the things that he loves to say, and I've really liked this saying, is that he said, neurons that fire together, what does he say? Roscoe's got it. Wire together. Anna's got it. Wire together. Nadine's got it. So neurons that fire together wire together. So in other words, as the energy moves through the single neuron and connects to other neurons as a passage of energy, the network, the communication channel strengthens between them, just as when you continue to develop a relationship by communicating with someone, your relationship strengthens, doesn't it? So this is the way the brain works, and strangely enough, this is the way that human beings work as well. All right, and so here is a single or isolated neuron, and basically what we have here is the cell body. Here's the dendrites, little arms that come off that receive the other ones, and you have an axon. This is apparently where the message is delivered. It goes out the axon and through into the synapses where it connects with other neurons and continues that the process of an action potential or thought propagation within the brain, right? Now, just to cut away the abstract for a moment, here's a real picture of a neuron, and don't ask me to explain how they possibly get these images. I think it's some form of laser spectroscopy, I think is the term. But isn't that incredible? So it looks pretty similar to our sort of depiction, our graphic depiction. This looks like a dendrite, doesn't it? This one. They're all coming into the cell body, and you see this major one coming out the front. That probably is the axon. It looks like there's a lot more light coming out through that, isn't it? All right, so it's it's becoming more and more tangible how the brain works. Here's another picture of a neuron. This is again here's a network where you have a bunch of neurons together. So these are real pictures apparently, and so this is the source is the University of Illinois via spatial light interference microscopy. I must pronounce that right, or SLIM. That's the technology that they're using. So amazing that we can see this, isn't it? But let us continue back to the neuron for a moment, right? Here's another picture of a neuron. I wanted to go into a little bit more depth because I wanted to show you something very important about the neuron. And Shane, I've just noticed you've said you can't see the screen. I'm not too sure why that is. I think there's no one else that's saying that, so it's probably going. But here's a neuron, and it's another picture I've just grasped off the internet. And what I want to draw your attention to is that these are the things that we typically are drawn attention-wise to, is the nucleus of the cell. You've got, your mitochondria where the aerobic metabolism takes place. You've got your Golgi apparatus. You've got your lysosome. So you've got your various aspects that develop proteins, for example. Now look at this. What I want you to see here. This what is referred to as microtubules. Okay, this is a very important thing that I don't think the general population is really well aware of yet. So microtubules, here we go. Another depiction. I've just grasped this off the internet, but you can see how the microtubules they're what make up what's called the cytoskeletal makeup. They are basically the skeleton or the structure of the cell that really enables the cellular processes to occur. It's the internal network, the structure that actually underlies how the cell works. Right now, look, here's one of the microtubules. And apparently that's made up of alpha and beta tubulins, which are molecules, interestingly enough, that are polarized either positive or negative. We could say they've got either a masculine or feminine charge, right? Now just notice down here, 24 nanometers is the size of the diameter of the microtubule. Now, who'd like to have a stab at how thick a piece of hair is if you pluck that off your head? How many nanometers across do you think it is? R is saying 100. So just consider these microtubules, 24 nanometers across. Anyone else want to have a go? So R, you're close, but 1,000 times off. But you got the first figure right. So a human hair is 100,000, 80 to 100,000 nanometers across. Does that give you an indication of how small these structures are within the brain? But they're really important, right? Because what they do is that they carry the proteins, kinesin is one of them, tau is one of them, dyanine's one of them, the proteins that move along the actual cell body, and they are centrally involved in delivering the various neurochemicals that cause the actual cell to work, right? And here's another view of the tubulin. It's a circular process, and this one's saying it's 25 nanometers across, right? So this underlies the basic structure of the cell, and as we'll come to see with recent research, that it is the basis of how consciousness resonates through the human system, right? So here's our microtubule, and I'm going to reference here, this is a slide from a presentation from Penrose and Hameroff, 1995. You can see that that's about 30 years old now, so this is not entirely new. Now this guy, Sir Roger Penrose, he's not a dropkick. He's a Nobel laureate in physics. He kind of knows a few things about how things work. So here's a slide from their presentation, and this looks like the cell body, perhaps that's the neuron. And you can see that it's filled up with these microtubules. See how it's the actual literal construct of the cell itself. And you can see here is the synapse where the other neuron, there's the microtubules within that, connects to the other neuron. So it's where you connect. And he's showing here in this particular slide that the microtubule is made up of these protein qubits. Remember the feminine and masculine ones, and then or neutral if they're standing next to each other. I suppose it's an electrical kind of polarity thing, right? So here's the other guy that's done this work. He's an anesthesiologist, Dr. Stuart Hameroff. I'm sure he's learned a fair amount about consciousness just due to the fact that he's always working with that, particularly to suppress it, right, whilst enormously important operations go down. And let's take a look at a little bit more about what they've got to say about this. So here's our neuron here. Here's the dendrites, the cell body. Here is the synapse. And what they're saying here is this is the old view of how the brain works. Mouse is not working too well here, is it? Saying the human brain is packed with cells called neurons that connect via networks of axons and dendrites. I just said that, right? Thanks for the little clip there, Roscoe. He's added for someone if they want to check that later. So these pass signals across minute spaces called synaptic gaps, right? Synaptic gaps. So this is the synaptic gap, otherwise known as the synaptic cleft. All right, and the way that the brain operates is that electric energy moves down along the axon, doesn't it? It facilitates a release of chemicals called neurotransmitters that jump across that synaptic gap, and they stimulate another propagation of electrical conduction in the neighboring nerve. That's how it continues through the network, right? So what does that look like? Here's a graphic depiction of the synapse. So electricity comes along here, chemicals jump across the gap, and you get a continuation of the thought. So back to here, I just want to show you, now that's the old view, by the way. The classical view says that thought is born from these connections between the neurons. Now, that's an interesting, contentious thing, because a lot of the spiritualists, a lot of the yoga masters, the highly realized beings, what they'll say is that, no, actually it's consciousness that's creating a movement in energy. It's not energy that's developing consciousness. So there's a bit of a contention between, the spiritually realized people and the scientists that can only really talk from a scientific background, right? So here's, in contradistinction, a different viewpoint. Orchestrated objective reduction theory, on the other hand, that's these guys' theory, suggests that consciousness originates from quantum interactions in the microtubules inside each cell. So they're saying that there's quantum firing of energy happening within the resonating chamber of the microtubules, and that's causing the energy to move, right? Isn't that a fascinating thing? So let's continue here. This is a bit more of their research. Here's the tubulin protein. So they're not just sort of making an abstract theory, they're researching this, and they're able to identify, there's the light radiation of the tubulin protein, here's the microtubule, and they do this through a technique called quantum tunneling. I couldn't really give you too much detail about that, but we'll look at an article shortly to go more into that. But you can see that they can measure, and there it is there, negative 20 millivolts, they can measure the amount of electromagnetic energy flowing through, that's gone the wrong way, these microtubules. So who's finding this interesting? Is there anyone bored? Let's check the number and see if we've still got just as many people on the thing. I don't know, maybe we're not all science nerds, but I find this pretty damn interesting, right? What do you reckon? This is fascinating, all right? Very interesting. Yeah, so we're on board here. Okay, so let's continue. If you think that's interesting, take a look at this. So microtubules in a cardiomyocyte. So let's translate the word there. Cardio refers to heart. Myo refers to muscle, and cyte refers to cell. So in other words, it's a muscle cell and within the heart. Now let's take a look at this. This is from the National Institutes of Health, by the way. Now this is a live video, and again, I don't know how the hell they got this, but well, at least they got it. But you can see the what's called the actin and myosin filaments, the protein filaments that creates a contraction of your muscle and gets you to move. Now just tangibly extend your arm out, reach it straight out so you've got a straight arm, palm toward the face, toward the ceiling rather. Now bring your palm back toward your shoulder and notice that your biceps is shortening. You see that? So what's causing your body to move, in other words, is exactly what's being demonstrated in this movement here of the heart muscle, which is how your heart beats, by the way. And you can see, this is really fascinating, look at the electrical phasing of energy moving through the microtubules as a non-local field. Can you see that, everyone? You can literally see it. It's like like an electrical conductivity moving through the microtubules. And bear in mind, microtubules are much less in a cardiac heart. It's much more in a neuron, much more densely compacted. But that's what's causing this to operate, right? It's giving it the instructions. So let's continue for a moment here. Next. It's not allowing me to continue. Try this one. All right, now if you think that's interesting, let's have a look at this journal article. Now this is from Nature. That's a reasonably prestigious journal, and it does look a little bit like gobbledygook if you're not used to reading this sort of thing, but accepted in 2014, so it's about 10 years old. So live visualizations of single isolated tubulin protein self-assembly via tunneling current, effective electromagnetic pumping during spontaneous growth of microtubules. So what is that really saying? They're saying that they're viewing live via quantum tunneling, they're viewing how the actual microtubules are growing as a result of response in relation to electromagnetic stimulation. Is everyone following me here? Okay, and this is the National Institute of Material Science, Nano Characterization Unit, Advanced Key Technologies Division in Japan. It's the Indian Institute of Technology. And we've got the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Harvard, MIT, Center for Health Science and Technology, Institute of Medical Science and Engineering. So it's, these are not average institutions. They're pretty well respected. Okay, so let's take a look at this. I'm just going to, there we go. Minimize that for a moment. And now I must have been halfway through reading this thing earlier. But here we go. This is the article here. I'll just read you out who's contributing to this, and it's quite funny because you've got Japanese and Indians, and I think there's a little bit of communication error translation here, but we're not going to look over the whole thing. Let's just read through the abstract here. I'll read it to you here. As we bring tubulin protein molecules one by one into the vicinity, they self-assemble, and the entire event we capture via live quantum tunneling. We observe how these molecules form a linear chain, and then chains self-assemble into 2D sheets, an essential for microtubule fundamental nanotube in a cellular life form. So let's just think about that for a moment. They see them self-assemble via live quantum tunneling. And what does that mean? A linear chain. So imagine if you have a sheet of paper, right? And it's in front of you, and you get your pen and you create a dot in the bottom left corner. You create a dot next to that, and next to that, and next to that, and so on and so forth until you have a line of dots across the entire page. Everybody with me? So that would be called a linear chain, wouldn't it? Now, if you create another linear chain above that, and another one, and so forth, can you see how now you're going to have a sheet? Right? You're going to have, it would have self-assembled into a 2D sheet. Now, imagine that you take the paper and you roll or take one edge of the paper and connect it with the other edge. It's now into a tube, isn't it? Can you see how three-dimensional forms are created from particles? And all you need is the bioresonant formula between each molecule to hold it into the position that generates the cellular tissues. You see how this is working? All right, so they've even said even without using GTP, that's guanosine triphosphate, it's a chemical that's involved in energy transfer within the cell, or any chemical reaction, but applying particular AC signal using specifically designed antenna around the atomic sharp tip, we could carry out the self-assembly. However, if there was no electromagnetic pumping, no self-assembly is observed. Now, this is really incredible. They're saying that electromagnetic energy, in other words, light, is causing the self-assembly of the proteins associated with the neurons, which then go to determine all of the other functions in the rest of the body, don't they? So in order to verify this atomic scale observation, we have built an artificial cell-like environment with nanoscale engineering and repeated spontaneous growth of tubulin protein to its complex with and without electromagnetic signal. We use 64 combinations of plant, animal, and fungi tubulins and several doping molecules as a drug, and repeatedly observed that the long-reported common frequency region where protein folds mechanically and its structures vibrate electromagnetically. So this is what they're looking for. It's the holy grail. They're looking for the common frequency where the protein folds. In other words, if you can stimulate the development of protein within the body via electromagnetic current, can you see how you're a magic person? You've got a technology that can be used, and that's going to be marketed, isn't it? That's going to make a lot of money because you've got someone with damaged tissue. You find the common frequency, you regenerate the tissue, and then now you've healed them. Isn't that amazing? Underpumping, the growth process exhibits unique organized behavior unprecedented otherwise. Thus, common frequency point is proposed as a tool to regulate protein complex related diseases in the future. Now, let me just zoom down because obviously we're not going to go into all this gobbledygook. I'll give you the article if you want to read through it. It's pretty hard going. There's a few pictures of their actual images of the nanotubes and the light rays going through that. I couldn't explain that to you. I'm not the scientist that has a PhD in this information. I'm just trying to make sense of it. But let's come down here to what have we got here? We'll cut through all the way down to, here we go. So this is the conclusion, all right? Here's the conclusion. So we'll just read a little bit out of this. And I'm going to highlight this for everyone. So there's a couple of things that we can look at this, all right? So recently it is argued that non-equilibrium phase transitions cause microtubule growth and decay in vitro. It would remain open it will remain an open question how 40,000 tubulins assemble in less than a microsecond. Now just think about that for a moment. That's a very amazing thing to consider, because we're talking about a nanoscale technology. But if that's how fast, we're talking about materialization here. This is how fast the proteins are assembling under the influence of this electromagnetic current. 40,000 tubulins in less than a microsecond. So if you've ever thought that you don't have the power to manifest, they're basically proving you wrong here. You're manifesting extremely fast. It's just that because of the magnitude of matter, the material matter, and how many atoms are involved, you don't immediately see that, right? But you only need to purchase a plant and water it over a period of weeks and prove to yourself that things are gradually materializing. So what's important to get from this is that the electromagnetic signal is impacting on this, right? Now, there are 30,000 and above proteins working relentlessly in our body, but the common frequency point, if it exists for all proteins, would open up the possibility to remotely cure diseases. Now, isn't that interesting? So they're saying, theoretically, if we can find the right light transmission, we can do this from a distance and cure disease. Reason, this is the majority of diseases affect the protein complex pathways, and until now, you've probably read through this, but I'm going to go through it. It was believed that protein undergoes pure mechanical vibrations at low frequencies and electromagnetic at very high frequencies. We'll talk about frequency shortly. This strategy of pinning the common point would open up a path for wireless treatment, which is not possible mechanically. So let's just break that down. Now I'd like you to grab your bottle of water with your hand. All right, lift it up and place it near to you. Lift it up, place it further away. Do you see how you just mechanically moved the bottle? It was a mass-to-mass interaction, wasn't it? That's why it's called biomechanics, because it's the mechanics of the physical body. Now, with the bottle further away, turn to it and direct your heart energy. Do you realize that your heart is a magnetic field? And set your intention to draw the bottle toward you. It's called telekinesis, right? Now, that would be talking about an electromagnetic, as opposed to mechanical, means of creating the movement of physical matter. Interesting? All right, so we're starting to get into a deeper understanding of how these superpowers become possible. So I'm going to leave that article for now. I hope I didn't lose anyone in the process of that science jargon. But let's continue on here, okay? So we've just talked about electromagnetic spectrum, haven't we? Come down here. Did you sneak the video on there, Nate? Okay, so we've just been talking about the electromagnetic spectrum. And so let's look a little bit more about what that actually is. So here's the light spectrum. They were just saying using electromagnetic or alternating current pulses, they were able to influence protein growth within the neurons, weren't they? So here's the electromagnetic spectrum, and let's define a few things here. So this is a wave, okay? Let's go from this way. So it's coming along the beach, isn't it? Along the ocean, and it's coming toward the beach. So that is one wave, isn't it? Right now, the way that electromagnetics and sound work is that it oscillates between a central axis. So an oscillation is from here to here. Now, a vibration is an oscillation going this way, and then that way, and then this way, and then that way, around a central neutral point. So, for example, when you play a stringed instrument, say you've struck a chord on the guitar, the reason that sound is being emitted is because the string is vibrating up and down, isn't it? So vibration tends to be more powerful. Well, it is more powerful as it becomes a shorter wavelength. So that, can you see how the wavelength from here to here is much longer than the wavelength from here to here? That's a much shorter wavelength, isn't it? All right, so all of these are interconnected. And so then the frequency, and I hope I'm not losing anyone here, would be the measurement in a given level of time. So let's say that this from here to here is a second, and I'm just creating a depiction here to generate understanding. And from here to here is also a second. It looks about approximately the same distance. So within that second, you can say that the radio wave occurs 1 and is about 1.5 times within that time, isn't it? In this period of time, at a shorter wavelength, the frequency is more like about 15, isn't it? You see that? Just wanting everyone to understand these things because we're going to be going into it. What you can see also is that the shorter wavelengths are organizing the subatomic, the atomic, the molecular, and then it moves out as it goes into longer wavelengths. It's organizing larger levels of material reality. And by the time it gets out to kind of visible light, what we're really interacting with and seeing, it's starting to come out to here, pinpoint. You can't really see anything much smaller than that, can you? You certainly can't see cells and protozoans and that sort of thing. So it goes beyond what we can see, but it's getting smaller, right? So the visible light spectrum is what our eyes are picking up. The longer wavelengths are organizing the larger, more enormous things within matter. The shorter ones, the smaller. Okay, so how do we know that this is not just sort of scientists pulling the wool over our eyes? Well, it's because we can see it with our own 2 eyes, right? I'm sure the flat earthers out there will be, oh, that's right, we can see it. That's the proof, right? All right, but I'm not asking anyone to go on dogmatic faith here. There it is. You see it every day. I saw one at the weekend. Who saw a rainbow at the weekend? That's the electromagnetic spectrum. That's the visible light spectrum, all right? And we're still in dimensions of mind here. Now, what I want to show you here also, no, mouse is still not misbehaving, is that light and sound are very similar things in that they form into an alternating sine wave. This is a sine wave, by the way. It goes back and forth. That's the signature of it, right? And so when you have color, then you also have an associated tone. So who's renovated their apartment or something, and then you've gone and thought, right, we're going to look at the colors, and you've gone through and you're going to look at the various tones and see which colors match with other tones. Everybody following me? So in common parlance, there's an understanding that color is also tone. So what is a tone? Tone is associated with a sound, isn't it? A sound is a frequency, as we just talked about it. It has a wavelength, and it has a pace at which it is oscillating or vibrating, right? It also has an amount of energy associated with it. So photons at the violet wavelength, 2.75 to 3.26 electron volts. Down here at red, 165 to 2 electron volts. Less powerful, isn't it? Everyone following? Now I want to connect that with sound more vividly so that you can connect how electromagnetism, sound and vibration really does organize physical particles, right? So let's have a look at this. So I'm not going to get you to sit through all of that. I hope you got the picture there. I hope you You got what that was conveying to us, right? Just reading a message here. But can you see how this quote from Tesla, it really matches what we're looking at here. If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. We just observe how the tone of that plate, the sound resonance moving through the plate, specifically organized the sand particles into geometrical shapes, didn't it? Did everybody see that? So that's an incredible observation to make, because it's going to tie into what we're really going to get into. So back to electromagnetic spectrum here. Now, if we take the light spectrum and place it next to that, who's seen this image before? Who's a yoga practitioner? All right. And sorry if I haven't kept up with the chat. I'm just hoping that it's not getting too technical and kind of sciencey for too many people. I find this really interesting. And, you know, if you follow what I'm saying, this is going somewhere. Really important, right? Really important. So here's the visible light spectrum. It's associated with the chakras, isn't it? All right. So here's our chakra man. And let's bring in our wavelength association here. So of course the red is associated with the base chakra, orange associated with the sacral, the yellow is associated with the solar plexus, green the heart, and so on and so forth, right? And we can see that there's a frequency and a wavelength associated with that. So who's also aware that the chakras, as it were, are associated with the elements? Who's familiar with that in yoga thought and terminology? All right, so in other words, the base chakra, the red wavelength, is associated with the physical body. That's plants, that's earth, sand, dirt, etc., right? Okay, orange wavelength, associated with sacral chakra, associated with the water element. Yellow, fire element, green, air element, etc., right? So in other words, the frequency is organizing the material level of manifestation. We just saw how sound organized those material particles, didn't we? So let's keep going here and make this a little more tangible. All right, so I'm just going to put the chat box away for a moment. Now, does it become a little more tangible, how we are existing within dimensional fields of energy that correspond not only to our body, but to the environment as well? The most dense physical energy, the fluid sits upon, we call it earth, don't we? But inside the earth, we have the metals and we have, you know, everything that's more solid. It's the harder, if you go to the atoms and the periodic table of elements, it's the harder, more dense, the ones with more electrons, more protons, elements, isn't it? Water sits on top of that, gas sits on top of that. So we talk about matter, we talk about solids, liquids, and gas. Now, in modern times, they're talking about fourth state of matter, and that's plasma, and that's a gas ignited with light, and that's interesting in and of itself. But one thing that's sort of raising a question here is, wait a minute, but where's the fire element? Okay, so if I change this picture, you'll straight away see that it's there. You see that? Okay, so we've still got our solid, we've still got our liquid, we've still got our gas. Now, the fire in the form of electricity, which is also the form of fire within the nervous system, within the body, by the way, and often if it's the lightning that hits the ground and the dry, grass and the trees, it's what sets it. How else is it going to set on fire, right? So it's got different forms, but it starts off fundamentally in its electrical form. And so, electricity as a dimensional field, it traverses because it carries consciousness. We saw that in the microtubules, didn't we? We saw how the electrical field moving through the microtubule was carrying consciousness, and that's what they were saying. And so it carries it through the gas, doesn't it? Now, which animal in nature shows us that it also travels through water? Which one comes to mind? Come on, you Nature Channel experts. What's who's that old bugger that loves to speak really kindly and put us to sleep on those Nature channels? He always talks about these sorts of things. Well, Kimberly's saying dolphin. I was expecting someone to say something else. Small snake-like creature. That's it, electric eel. So we know definitely. So electricity goes through the water, doesn't it? Otherwise, those electric eels would have to actually get their ass off their couch and go and fight for their food rather than just zapping them. And certainly we know that electricity moves through the solid reality, because otherwise you wouldn't be viewing a screen that was illuminated, would you? Without electromagnetic energy, electrical energy moving through the minerals of your screen, etc. Right? So let's keep going here. We've got our dimensional fields. I made it. It's a nice day again. You'll be happy again. Now let's overlay that with the light spectrum. Can you see how actually the tone and frequency of the red light spectrum is associated with organizing physical matter, isn't it? The orange wavelength, fluid, and then we have the gas associated with this. Now, it's not just, haphazardly thrown together. It definitely correlates, because when you're breathing in air, what happens? Where's the movement? Your chest rises, doesn't it? So you're literally bringing the air element into your system at that point. If you go to the solar plexus, you'll find that is the biggest area of electrical network, the solar plexus, right? Why is it called solar plexus? What is solar associated with? You see how it all connects here? And if you go down to here, the sacral plexus, that's right, Justin, the sun. In other words, the fire, the source of fire. So you come down to the sacral plexus. Now push your finger into there. You'll feel there's actually not a lot in there unless you push into your spine at the very back. But what you find is that it's just like a big water bottle, isn't there? So you basically all water through there except for your spine. And there's a reason for that. It helps with digestion and osmosis and all that sort of thing. But that's your water center. And of course, the physical is associated with the physical body itself, right? So what we're really talking about is the physical particle base of the earth, right? It's those three dimensions, solid, liquid, gas, with the electrical energy moving through it. The other element, of course, is the magnetic field, which is often unseen by a lot of people, or unsensed, we could say. So let's put this into a bigger perspective now, because there's not just those three dimensions that we're dealing with. We're also dealing with high dimensions, right? And there is a reality in these high dimensions as well. Earth also exists in dimensions 4, 5, and 6. The atmospheric base is actually the fourth dimension, because the planet is in transition between here and here at this point in time. Now, could you see how, although the air, the atmospheric base, is blatantly there all the time, if you think about human consciousness currently, what is one indication that shows us that people are not aware of the sky? They're not aware of the earth of the air element. What comes out to you right away? And it's a little bit infuriating too if you study these sorts of things. You look up, right, and you see these stripes across the sky, don't you? Yeah, I was saying chemtrails. So, you see these blatant chemtrails striping across the sky, and you are literally looking at people and just in disbelief, like they haven't noticed that it's there, right? And it's like they're just not aware. They're not aware of the air element. It's a fourth dimensional energy, right? And likewise, people are not aware of how important their breathing is. Because you think about this for a moment. Everybody's focused on eating. Yeah, sure, we're getting hungry. Let's go and have a feed. Definitely. Now, how long do you last without food or water? Days and weeks, isn't it? How long can you hold your breath for? How long can you go before you start getting brain damage if your oxygen supply is cut off? Right? And Gabby's saying the air is not tangible. That's right, because the higher in frequency we go, the less dense the energy form is, the more intangible it is, hence spiritual development, right? You're going into intangible fields of consciousness that aren't detectable to the usual sensory mind. Okay, so if everybody was consciously aware on the gaseous level, don't you think they'd be meditating? I mean, it's pretty straightforward, isn't it? If you don't breathe for a few minutes, you're getting brain damage, and yet people aren't practicing breathing. Can you see how people aren't aware of that? So this is because in terms of their consciousness, they're focused on the physical, the emotional, and the mental body associated with physicality, biochemical exchanges, and electrical exchanges occurring. In other words, the physiology, the physical body, right? So if you want to become aware in this field of awareness and this field of awareness, you start meditating. People that start meditating, what happens to people that start meditating? By the way, there's a magnetic repulsion zone between these two reality fields. You can't walk into this with your physical body. You need the appropriate corresponding body. So that's the astral field, right? Now, who's here has had an out-of-body experience or an astral projection? Or who has been in a dream, for example? I think David Wilcock has a book called Awaken the Dream, right? So Gabby's saying, sure, I have. Yep, dream field. Justin Marzi is saying yes. Okay, so the reason that you are becoming consciously aware in the astral field or your astral body, and you can travel about, if you're very skilled at it, you can remain near the 3D, as it were, 3 dimensions corresponding to the Earth environment. You'd make a very good spy, wouldn't you? But generally speaking, it goes straight into the second harmonic, and there's not an direct interaction between the two worlds. So, you find yourself in this bizarre world that is, I've never been here before. Strangely enough, saying remote viewing, that's right. They use the astral field to remote view because it goes outside of space and time. So, for example, the other day, it was about 2 weeks ago, I was in meditation and I was listening to my flatmate have a conversation with her daughter. This, if she's on the webinar, this is the first time she's hearing about this. So, in other words, my electrical sensors were plugged in. Obviously, wasn't practicing Pratyahara very well, was I? So I was hearing that conversation going on. Well, I wasn't listening. Okay, look, I wasn't listening, but I was aware that the conversation was going on. But at the same time, I was viewing with interior vision into the astral field. And what I saw is that inside of our apartment, the table was in a different location. It was actually a different table. And if you go to some of the astral projection forums and things, then this is quite common, is that you can get something in the astral field that is from a different space-time location because it's space and time is warped in that field. That's why remote viewers can operate like that, right? Anyway, so this guy jumped down onto the table in the astral field. And that created a fight or flight response in my heart. My heart started beating faster, and then I was immediately drawn back into the physical body, and I lost the astral vision. So you've got to be, it's very difficult to maintain your consciousness in that it's a kind of transcendental state of mind, which the remote viewers need to do. You need to go through these various skill learning techniques, such as the yogis guide us through, Pratyahara being central to that, where you cut off sensory interference and focus your consciousness inside yourself, right? So that's pretty fascinating, isn't it? But if you activate the 4th DNA strand, what will happen is that you'll naturally start to project into your astral body, which gives you access to these dimensional fields, which correlate with a holographic zone called the second harmonic universe, right? You can fly up there, you can start checking things out. So I think I've spoken previously in a previous webinar about various astral experiences. I don't focus upon this because the masters always say don't focus on developing siddhis. These are magical powers. Just focus on the source, embody the source, and you're going to get all the powers anyway. So I think that's the fastest approach. But at one point, and this is maybe 10 years or so, that this time that I really got this vividly, I was actually just lying in my apartment, and I was kind of, the best way to go out of body is you're between the delta and theta. So delta is sleep, theta is deep meditation, and you're sort of in that stage. And this portal opened up in my third eye, and I could see kind of waves. There was obviously a world through there, and I just used my will to kind of dive through the portal in my frontal lobe, the third eye, And I felt my whole essence and astral body move out of it, my physical body, like it sucked down this tunnel. I suppose the tunnel was probably the magnetic repulsion zone, and entered into this field, but it must have been not the astral, the lower dimensional bands, which don't have a lot of light radiating. If you've been to this field before, you could mistaken it for the physical. It's like you won't even realize you're there, and then you'll come back to your body and go, what the, I thought I was in the physical. So it's quite confusing. But this particular time, this is where I realized that these higher dimensional bands, they radiate more light. So in this particular occurrence, I was just blown away because the whole ocean was glowing with light. The sands of this island, I flew over the ocean toward, because you can of course fly, so toward this island where the sand was radiating with this golden light. I could touch the tree, and the tree responded. It like shook as I touched my hand. My hand kind of almost melted into it a little bit, so it was less dense. So, when you have these experiences yourself, you'll come to realize that this is not just a philosophy, it's a reality, right? It's the truth. You've got to experience it yourself to get that. So anyway, these experiential reality fields, they, according to the Guardian Alliance, according to advanced races, and I'm going to touch on who that is shortly, they continue up further and further into more and more refined states of existence, right? Here's dimensions 10, 11, 12 up here, creating this, what is referred to as Aratena, which is actually the Earth. We could say it's the avatar consciousness of the Earth. That's the field that it exists in. And ultimately to the 15th dimension, Hasha, so it's like it's a sun, right? And continuing past that, I'll explain where this information is coming from shortly, to the primal sound fields that are associated with the sacred rays, the first, the second, and the third ray, which is really divine trinity, right? And beyond that is the unified consciousness of the One existing beyond all manifestation, according to these advanced races, right? Now, here's another way to look at it. Dimensions 1 through to 15, okay? And if you want to integrate this, sorry, I'm just going ahead of myself, levels of identity, you'll need to activate, and I'll touch on this shortly, the DNA corresponding to these fields. It starts to come into your consciousness, like the scientists were suggesting, as an electromagnetic field or frequency. You get it direct cognition, right? So your consciousness, when it's what's called phase locked into these lower dimensions, that's your ego, right? If you begin to integrate these levels of energy, right, which is your astral field, the archetypal field, and the angelic field, that brings in your soul consciousness. So you can bring through a lot more of your skills that you've developed in other space-time coordinates, other lifetimes, we could say, and then you suddenly just know a lot more. You're a lot more capable, and everyone's like, how do you know so much? I don't know. It's just there. So then the next level is your oversoul, and this is according to these advanced races, right? They are explaining how the universal makeup goes. This level is avatar, so when you have someone like Jesus or Buddha, they've embodied 12 full dimensions of consciousness, right? That's why they're so powerful. And the way this works, according to these advanced races, is that the soul projects 12 incarnations, which are called ego level consciousness. The oversoul projects 12 into the soul, and the avatar projects 12 into the oversoul. So in other words, 12 times 12, the soul, the oversoul, is the same as 144 incarnations, isn't it? Soul is the same as 12 incarnations. And then if we go to here, 1728. Imagine how much you'd know if you could bring together what you've learned in an entire lifetime and condense that into one mind with 1727 other lifetimes. You're going to be, pretty damned extraordinary, hey? So then a rishi projects 12 avatars. So I don't even know what the figure is, but it's probably 9,000 something, right? So that gives you an idea of the levels of identity associated with the multidimensional universe that we live in. If you make it outside of the light field, this is a light field, by the way, this is how time and space occurs, and into the primal sound fields, these are the levels of ascended mastery. You've got a type 1 ascended master, type 2, and type 3. All right, so that knowledge in place, it gives us a construct to observe the levels of influence, all right? That being said, we've finally got to the point where I can explain with a reasonable level of comprehension this intangible concept of non-physical influence. Okay, so here we are, existing in our birth-given body, which is either going to be a male or a female, isn't it? Does anyone have any like confusions about that? Apparently that's a difficult thing to work out these days. But you might have different colour hair, different colour face, but you're going to be either a female or a male. And for anyone that's just uncertain about that, I'm just going to play this clip from Kindergarten Cop. A 5-year-old's going to explain it, okay?
Yes.
I need to go to the bathroom.
Okay, you can go.
Boys have a penis, girls have a vagina.
Thanks for the...
Yeah, thanks for the tip. All right, so does that clear that up for everybody? Just in case there's any uncertainty out there. Okay, I hope that's made things clear. So here we are in our male or female body, all right, and we're existing on Earth, aren't we? Now, here's a way that I'm going to categorize what an influence is. It's either going to have a downing effect on you. It's going to lower your vibration, okay, which means that your mood is coming lower, your energy is coming lower, your brain function is coming lower, your physiological function is reducing, you're degenerating, and you're steadily progressing into the grave. Make sense? Okay, it's either heading that way toward death, or the influence is going to have an elevating effect on your energy, and it's going to raise you into a higher vibration. Because it's one of the two ways, isn't it? It's either out into matter, confusion and death, or it's back toward the source of life, where you necessarily must raise your vibration to even be able to reach those higher levels. It's one of the two. So here we are in our Earth environment, and let's look at some of the things that are going to be impacting on us. Now, we're not going to go into a big conspiracy theory talk here, but we're just going to acknowledge in symbolic form the various influences that we have. So here's one here. Obviously, this is associated with a secret society. So whether you understand, believe in, or know anything about secret societies at all is not really relevant to whether or not they exist or impact upon your life. The reality is, if you want to put it in a really basic way, is that some people like to gather as much financial power and leverage as possible over the rest of the population so that they can control, because that's where they gain their enjoyment. You'll know from your own life that some people like telling other people what to do, and that when someone else has to do what they say, they feel important, right? So this is basically what we're talking about here. As people that are still, in terms of their spiritual evolution, they're still stuck down here in the third dimensional plane of power, consciousness, intellectualism, and the delusion of superiority over others. These are called tyrants, right? So these financial elite, these controlling cabals, they meet up behind the circles. It's associated with, the Bilderbergers, the Club of Rome, the Trilateral Commission. These days it's associated with the World Economic Forum, isn't it? And other transnational corporate bodies. They sort of are the financial shareholders behind these major corporations. And so they get to say how things go. And as a result of that, they have a large influence over the general population. And, they're not really so interested in your empowerment, rather than the opposite. They're interested in your disempowerment, because if you don't have your power, they have their power. They have your power. If they have your power, they feel better about themselves, right? Or they feel more, they feel as if they're living their life more fruitfully, I could say. Now, let's take a look at, as we go down the chain, we have those secret societies, as I said, controlling the various corporations, don't we? There's always the financial elite at the head of the major corporations, and the corporations, they're the ones that are sort of putting up these things, and this is sort of just symbolic representation of what you're supposed to focus upon. Now, if you've been in a webinar previously with me and Nate, we started off by basically saying that your energy and your power is in your attention, didn't we? We really wanted to drum that home to say your energy and power is in your attention. Be careful where you place your attention. Nate talked about it to begin with. You really want to focus on things that benefit you. So this is what we're trying to really outline here. So the corporations try and capture your attentions. The way they make money is that they convince you that you need their goods and services, don't they? We're placing this on the left-hand side. Now, it's not black and white as much as we want to do that. What happened there? And make things really simple. It's not black and white. Sometimes we could say this side of the equation actually has a beneficial effect on us. Oops, I'm racing ahead here because I'm using the mouse pad instead of the mouse. Sometimes it has an awakening effect on us, doesn't it? For example, here we go. Our next sort of symbolic communication is that of the person at the podium. So we could say that might be a politician or a public spokesperson, etc. Now, they're part of the system because if they don't do what they're told by the secret societies, what's that going? I'm going the wrong way. If they don't do what the secret societies tell them, because they're the financial elite, right? I mean, I think it was Amschel Rothschild, which is the father of all these 5 Rothschilds that were sent into different areas of the globe to deal with their big banking dynasty. I think he said, give me control over the finances of a country and I don't care who makes the rules. I think that's the quote, right? And they took over the Bank of London. I think it was in the 1700s or 1800s, early 1800s, perhaps, no, 1700s, I forget. But from there, then they went and took over the rest of the financial institutions around the world and got this manipulative advantage, right? And so the point being that when you have these figureheads called politicians, it doesn't really matter whether they have good intentions or not, because they can easily rig the elections, they can easily control the influences through the media, which we'll look at shortly. They can really determine who's going to be at the podium telling people what they can and can't do. Do you see how that fits into this paradigm? It's people telling people what they can and can't do, controllers. So it doesn't matter if the politician has very good intentions, they're probably not going to make it very far up the scale because it's going to be controlled in some way. So how do they control things? One thing is through finances, as we've just illustrated. Another major way is through the news, isn't it? And now news, not just news, but we could say screen technology. So technocrats are really taking over as the new lords and masters of how civilization is going to go, isn't it? And we're not going to go right into the whole new Green Deal and the Fourth Industrial Revolution and so on and so forth that Klaus Schwab likes to pout how lovely this is for us, and you're going to own nothing and be happy and all that. But they're really trying to drive us into this technologically run, institutionalized society where people are controlling what you can and can't do from behind a screen with the click of a button, isn't it? That's where they're trying to push us. And further down, of course, they're wanting to insert microchips into your brain to make sure the signal gets through. All right, but it's really being handled through the control of media, isn't it? So that's representative of that side of the equation, and that influence, that dark influence. And then, of course, we have the academic institutions that are teaching old school dogmas. It's really controlled in various ways. If you look into the history, I looked into this a while back, you'll see that, for example, a lot of the libraries were brought up by one of these family lineages. I forget which one it was now. But the people with money bought up all the libraries so they can control what books are available to the people. And of course, when you come to universities, you don't get a study that is going to be funded unless it's approved by the people that are supplying the money, right? Now, if the people are going to be supplying the money, you're going to be giving them the result that they want. Otherwise, they're going to withdraw funding. See how that works? So again, it's not that this is all bad. It's just that it tends to be, it's a machine, and that it tends to be that it's going to draw you down because they're looking to take your power, not to empower you, right? Certainly we have some teachers that can teach us some amazing things. I just showed a couple of them on the screen, didn't I? That was helpful. It There's a Nobel laureate there. So within the system, of course, I'm not saying the whole system's bad, it's useless, it's evil. We're just looking at the general influence of either plus or minus. It draws you down or it lifts you up. You're the one that needs to determine that, right? So on the other side of the equation, we have our wise men of society that have expanded into higher levels of consciousness, and they're able to inform us about things that we would otherwise be unaware of. Now, most obvious example of that would be yoga masters, wouldn't it? Which is why I've got this picture here. If you look toward ancient texts like the Vedas, what you have is a passed down knowledge. I think they refer to this as Shruti in the yogic terminology, where these masters go into high states of consciousness and they literally verbally communicate that to others. It's like a tale and a legend being passed down through the ancestral lineage. And if you follow what they say, then you can also experience that expanded state of consciousness. So you can see how this is really an elevating influence. They're looking to enhance your life by increase your systemic efficiency and effectiveness, isn't it? Now here's another example, and it's, I'm not sort of pitching for the New Age religion here, but you might have had some spiritual medium, perhaps a channel that brought through information from literally one of these higher spheres of awareness. Now we're going to get to that shortly, but certainly this is a grey area, because you could have a channel, so to speak, that's bringing through someone from here. And, that's probably not really going to be someone you want to listen to. I would be pitching for, someone that's coming from here or here, at the very least from here, higher levels of reality, but who in their own experience has had, some sort of crystal ball type person, medium, has given them a message at some point, and that's really uplifted you, and that's caused you to feel like it was right on mark, and you were inspired by that. You felt an elevation, a real resonance, and that sort of compelled you to look further into, self-investigation or spiritual studies, and or so on and so forth. Does anyone can relate to that sort of influence? Megan's saying yes. Julianne, yes. Tessa, yes. Kimberly, yes. Okay, so in contradistinction, it could have been one of these kind of New Age loopies who's claiming to channel the angels, and they give you some information, and then it feels off what they're saying. Right? Gabby's saying, I started with a psychic medium around 9 years ago. So who's had that experience where someone said something, and then they're saying something, and they're saying it's true, but internal, your feeling state is telling you that's dead, what they're saying. There's no life in what they're saying. It's not elevating me. Michelle's saying yes. Some are not authentic. Sadly, says Paula. Vicky's saying yes. Okay, so see how you have your own internal barometer to be able to measure if the vibration that's coming through from other people, is it elevating you or is it bringing you down? Kimberly's asking, what do shamanic healers tune into? Which dimension? Not plants, medicine, but intuitive healing. So I couldn't answer that for you, Kimberly, because a shaman could be existing as a rishi up here. A shaman could be existing as an avatar or as an oversoul. I know as an oversoul consciousness, the associated higher sense is, what do they call it? Transmigration, transmutation. So in other words, they can project their consciousness into an eagle and they become an eagle, right? They literally embody the eagle. Or classically, the Indian shaman becomes the wolf, and gallops through the jungle, and they are the wolf because they project their consciousness. That's transmigration, right? But when you get up to these levels, avatar and rishi, because they have such level over material reality, they have immediate manifestation, they can actually upfold their body into light and reform into a different form altogether. Like there's no limitation for them. They could disappear. You could literally see their physical form turn into a vapor of light and merge with the river, and they've become the river, right? They've become the air. Babaji, for example, is known as he likes to refer to himself as the air sometimes. He is the air. And I had an experience the other day, for example. I won't drag out too many personal stories, but I recently read this book from an ancient master called Agastya Muni, and he's been around for a long time in the same body, like thousands of years, longer than the current age. So he was here prior to the cataclysm, the antediluvian time, prior to the last ice age. So we're talking about someone that's at least 10,000 years old. Anyway, so yeah, I'm reading this book, and he's connected to me to Ganesha. I didn't know anything about Ganesha, but I got interested because I was reading this book, and then I suddenly had this vision in my third eye of this elephant face, and I was like, what is this? And the eyes of this being with an elephant face, which I subsequently come to understand is called Ganesha, this is the son of Shiva in Hindu terminology. I had to look this up, right? And the eyes of this being it was just incredible, because you look into the eyes of a cow, for example, and you just see this amazing innocence, don't you? And it makes you wonder how anyone can hurt animals. But this beautiful innocence of animal-like purity was in the eyes, but at the same time, there was this spark of remarkable intelligence. So it was this great purity and innocence and extreme intelligence in one look. And I was like, wow, who's this? I recognize that's a Hindu god, so I'm going to go and find out what that means. Anyway, he was drinking honey out of a jar. So I had to go and, of course, go up and look, what does honeymoon and mean, and there's symbolic associations with that. So it was a communication. And then, anyway, this all associated with Agastya Muni. And at a later point, I'm not going to share what happened there, but I'm not always absolutely perfect. I'll never claim to be that. I'm a bit of a rascal sometimes, but I was doing something that I shouldn't be doing. And then suddenly this wind picked up in the trees outside the apartment, and it was like, that just doesn't happen, right? The wind just started blowing through the trees, and it was just a reminder, hey, we're watching what's happening, stay on track, behave well, and it will be well. So that's a little side story for that. That's interesting. High dimension. Kimberly's asking, last question, the Akashic readings, high dimensions, they are reading, seeing in the field. Now, Anna's saying, I really want to know what you're doing. Now, Akashic readings, let me think. I have come across information about where the Akashic reading is held. One thing I could put you onto would be what are referred to as the CDT plates. There's the Claustro Tura plates, and that refers, I believe, to the first, the second, and the third harmonic universes. So I suppose perhaps the Akashic field is the storehouse of information relating to these lower harmonics, perhaps at the metagalactic core in D8. They might be held there, but the CDT plates were actual physical crystalline alloy plates that were given to humanity, Ashiyadin's Justin saying, and they hold the records of the past and the future. In other words, the Akashic field, it's like a tool to access the Akashic field. And Ashiyadin was trained from a young child by the priests of light that exist in, there's a location in Hawaii, and also the inner earth, which we won't go into tonight, but they trained her how to remotely view and access the information from the CDT plate. So if you want to learn about that, type that into your Google search, learn about that. You also have the capacity to learn to tune into that. Others have also learned to do that as well. Teddy's saying you can read online archives. So pretty interesting stuff, isn't it? We're just going to have to move on, because otherwise we'll be here forever. Neil's chanting at me saying, it's getting late, people have kids, yo, get your ass together. All right, now I'll try not to be too much longer, and we'll get into the energy work. Neil was giving me an encouraging kind of move along. I trust you're finding it interesting. I find it pretty interesting. But here's another influence. Let's go through a little quicker then. Someone might have said something that is inspiring to you. So who does that remind you of? That's probably a bit of a well-known public figure. And so the statements of great people echo throughout the ages. For example, you probably know a quote from Plato for example, right? Or Socrates, or someone from the ancient Greek period. So, Agastya, there'll be a few floating around, a few quotes floating around from the Vedas. He's talked about in the Vedas. But you will have heard amazing quotes throughout time that inspire you and elevate you. So it's on this side, isn't it? It's great people, words that they've said, and influences that they have. You have genuine people within the health and well-being industry that are seeking to help your system be developed into a higher function. They're wanting to have you heal. They're wanting to cure you. Now, in contradistinction, and I'm not going to blackball the medical establishment, that's not my way, but there are some people within the medical establishment that are actually under the authority of, the Rockefellers, for example, that actually are not interested in curing you. A lot of the treatments that they give are really designed to suppress the symptoms, but not actually cure the problem that you are presenting with. And thereby, you become an ongoing patient, don't you? So you're a source of income. The challenge for people that have integrity in the health and wellness industry is that if you help someone to heal, they've no longer got a problem, have they? That means you potentially lose a client. But you can't see it like that, right? Nadine's saying a healthy person is a lost customer. I don't see it like that. I see it that, and this is a way to see it in terms of abundance and unlimitedness. If you help someone, well, they'll tell someone else that you helped them. And then there's probably going to be someone else that will come. And you can feel good that you've helped someone rather than clinging on to the fearful lack mentality of let me cling on to this person and not quite get them to the place that they want to go so they continue to be a client. You see how that's a lack mentality? So the real genuine people that are looking to help people, they go on that side of the equation too. And then we have people like entrepreneurs who are, genuinely seeking to create industry that does help people. Take, for example, Telegram. That's been a really helpful telecommunication service lately, where we've had people trying to suppress freedom of speech. We've got Elon Musk raising his voice there and saying, hey, we've got to be able to talk freely on the internet. I think he's a bit of a Trojan horse if we are to look at that. But, in the interim period, that's great to have someone saying, let's protect freedom of speech, because if truth can't come forth, how the hell are we going to move forward? You're certainly not going to survive, are you? Because you're going to be given dogma. It's going to be rammed down your throat by these guys, and you're going to remain under the control of this side of the pyramid of the equation. So then you have, people like friends and family that are supportive. They are also potentially assisting us, aren't they? Raising your vibration, giving you comfort when you need it. They can also be on the other side of the equation, can't they? They can be horrible as well. So it's not black and white, is it? But generally speaking, if you've got some support network that's going to help you elevate, you might have someone that's really nice and close and they're there for you when you need them. That's a support. So if you look at that, we're now looking at the three-dimensional influences, aren't we? On Earth, you've got to be able to discern between these influences if you want to take control of your vibration and elevate yourself. Can you see how it's that simple? And it's not necessarily a logical thing, because the intellect can be a track, because you'll get people down here in corporate bodies and in positions of power in the medical establishment. They'll tell you something that's very logical. It'll make sense to you, and you'll go, yes, that makes sense. I better do what they say. I mean, it doesn't take too much to think of an example of how a medical authority has given advice, as it were, most recently. It hasn't worked out well for people, has it? All right. So, we've got to look very carefully at what's being said on the intellectual level, which is often backed up by academic studies, isn't it? Because that's not necessarily going to give us the truth, but our feeling state, that's what's going to give us the truth. Does this really feel right? Is it elevating us, or is it actually making us feel worried and fearful? Is that what's cajoling us toward what's being offered? We've really got to think about that, don't we? So now let's have a look at some of the off-planet sources, and I'm going to have to race through this because, as Nate's saying, it's moving along. And I've just slanted the screen a little in a shaded way to sort of convey this a little more effectively. So who's seen these guys, for example? And I've touched on this in previous webinars, but for those who haven't looked at this, this is pretty powerful stuff, and I'm getting to the point here. Okay, so these are known as the zeta grays. They come from the zeta reticuli, and unbeknownst to the general population, and this is where thank you, Tessa, saying that she enjoys the webinars so much. These beings, unbeknownst to the populations, they are really nasty buggers, at least the unenlightened faction. And it gives you an insight as to how the equation on Earth is not simple. It's not black and white. It's not that we have good guys and bad guys. We've got a continuum of consciousness. Some people, perhaps we could say, over this side of the spectrum, are more compelled by their fears. Over this side of the equation, they're probably more compelled by their inspirations and love and feeling. So we really have this two, lopsided dynamic where a lot of people are getting drawn into this side of the equation because of the mentality of fear. And these guys have utilized that in a very effective way. So say, for example, and you only get the very top executives and the high-level elite that are behind the scenes controlling it. They're the only ones that these guys are going to be contacting. They won't waste their time with these guys. Why would they do that? They'll go straight to the people in control. And I saw a testimonial, there's loads of testimonials out there about people that have had exposure to these extraterrestrial beings. And he said that he was part of this operation, but they had one of these Zetas in an underground base, and they were interrogating them, deep underground base, right? DUMS, deep underground military base. They were interrogating this being and trying to extract information from them. And they do horrible things to get information from people, don't they? Such as torture. But they accidentally killed one of them. And apparently there were two other agents in the room and doing the interrogating. The moment that this being got killed, the two agents were disintegrated. Their whole body was vaporized. So just think about that for a moment. If they have a technology where they can make a person literally demolecularize, disintegrate, and turn into a molecular soup on the ground, if you saw someone that happened to someone, how much fear is that going to instill within you? It doesn't matter how brave you are. That's going to really freak you out, isn't it? So that just gives you an indication of the ways that this side of the equation get control, because they do something like that in front of these controllers that are already impelled by fear because they're beaten and raped and by pedophiles when they're young. This is the way they get them under control. And then they see that happen and they think, shit, I better do exactly as I'm bloody well told, otherwise I'm going to get disintegrated. And then, you get the various levels of influence to corporate bodies relating to financial and honey trapping, where they invite them. Who's heard of, for example, the United Nations annually have a gathering where I think their headquarters is in New York, maybe. And literally the level of prostitutes in the city rises tenfold just over this weekend where they have the gathering. And so they're doing that because all these guys are, of course, base desire people. They want to just take advantage. But what they do is that they get cameras on them secretly in the rooms, and then they record them doing dubious things, oftentimes with children, and compromise them in such a way that they can then blackmail them. So then they've got these guys with videotapes of people in political positions of power or corporate power, and of them having sex with children or raping, whatever, They're going to do what they're told, aren't they? You see how this works? So just to give you an indication, here's another entity or race that exists on this plane, and that is the reptoids. In a previous webinar, I did share an experience that I had. It was probably about 12 years ago now, and the ones that I interfaced with didn't look exactly like this. They had longer snouts, but I'll just quickly breeze over. So I'm just giving you this story, so it's a definite experience. It's not just a theoretical thing. I came out of the body from the physical down here into the astral field, and I found myself in an apartment, and it looked like I was on the Gold Coast or something. And I knew that I just entered the astral field because I felt my body leave the physical, but I was suddenly in an apartment, and I was like, what? Why am I in an apartment in the Gold Coast? what's going on here? Moreover, my mum was in the apartment, my sister and my brother were on the couch, and my mother was standing a little bit further over toward the ranch slider. And I knew, logically, that they weren't, how could they be there? There's no way that they can all be in the astral field. So I started inquiring, speaking to Mum, who was standing, Mum, with the fingers quoting in the air, standing by the ranch slider. I said, you can't be here. You can't be Mum. What is this? The moment I started inquiring, the Mum's face, my mother's face, morphed into, doesn't quite look like that, with a longer snout, but a reptoid or reptilian being, started advancing toward me with his clawed hand outstretched. So this is like 12 years ago, right? So I was like, probably not quite as informed as I am now. It doesn't make me sound like a very brave person, but I was out of there pretty quick, right? Because there's these 3 reptoids. And what was really amazing about that experience is that normally you'd come back through the solar plexus or the third eye chakra, but I came through the heart chakra. And the reason I know that is because I was back into the body so fast, it felt like someone punched me in the chest. I was like, oof. And then the other thing that was really interesting about that is because I'd came back so quickly, my astral body hadn't connected to the nervous system yet, and so I couldn't move my physical body, yet I was in the physical body. Imagine how even more scary that would be. So I'm lying in my body, paralyzed, after the reptilians are coming after me. All right, so I'm not telling you that story to terrorize you. It's a very unlikely thing to occur. I'm just sharing that to let you know that this is a reality. I don't believe they could have hurt me. You can always leave. They can't trap you in your astral body because your consciousness can move in space and time. So you just intend to be back in your physical, and that's where you are, right? But I think what they were trying to do is to terrorize me so I didn't continue with the work that I'm now doing, right? And I've had many of these sorts of things. We had ETs in the driveway once. I'm not going to go into more detail, but another race called the Draco is a combination of human genetics and the reptilians. So they're a bit more reptilian, and it's as a figure of how's everyone going out there? Because I can continue with elaborating with these stories, which might interesting people, or it might be just too much. How's everyone going? Just being mindful of time. Tessa's saying continue. Anya's saying love your stories. Great, Ray, awesome. Feel welcome to say I'm at my overload and let's move on to some energy work, because I want to serve everybody in the best possible way. Adam's saying loving it. I've got a positive response in general. I'm not going to talk too much more, but I'll share a little bit more. So the Draco, for example, they've been interacting directly with the military, the covert military and the deep underground military bases. And Corey Good, for example, told a story about how the military went down there at some point to break into these underground bases. And thank you, Teddy, for sharing that. And they didn't realize that there were Draco sitting in the base. So can you imagine how much of a freak out that would have been? And they had to face them, like actually face them with weapons. And these guys are, badasses. So there's a story on the internet. I think it's in Blue Sphere Being Alliance website. But let's race through here. You've got the the Zephelium, which are administrators of the Zeta Greys. Vias is saying, thank you, very interesting. You've got the Dracon. Now we're getting into some real badass negative entities. You've got the Omicron dragon moths in the third harmonic. You've got the Odedicron, a reptilian, avian reptile being. And these guys are dark avatars, right? They're 10th dimensional beings. So just imagine how powerful they really are. These are ancient beings. They have the point is that they have an influence on us, right? Now you have the Anu Elohim, which are a degradation of a race called the Anuhazi, and you have the Anunnaki. Who's here is a fan of Gaia, for example? Does anyone watch the Gaia channel? Okay, Flower's saying yes, Tessa's saying yes. Yep, says so. A few people are Gaia fans. No says so Gaia as a channel has a lot of really cool information. It's helpful in a lot of ways, but if you pay attention, you'll realize that it's being slanted toward Anunnaki dogma. You'll see that they are trying to refer to the Zecharia Sitchin material in terms of Anunnaki being our progenitors. Well, I've got news for you. They are very definitely not our progenitors. They're what's called an intruder race. They are an 11th dimensional being. They're dark avatars. So, Jesus is on this side. They're on this side. They're almost as powerful as him. And they had a real significant influence over our race. For example, during the Egyptian dynastic period, the Sphinx used to have the head of a lion. That was a race called the Anuhazi. Sekhmet is associated with that. You will have seen now that the Sphinx doesn't have a head of a lion because the Anunnaki come down, smashed it, and you can see how the head on the Sphinx is definitely smaller than the proportion of the body. So they broke down the lion's face, they put their own face on it, and they tried to claim as the progenitors of humanity. That's what they're trying to do. They are the ones that are influencing what these guys are saying, and they're trying to lead us down that path toward a transhumanist, technocratic utopia, which is a dystopia, isn't it? So just be mindful of that, okay? These are the influences. Now let's take a quick look on the other side of the equation. We've got the Pleiadians. There's a fair amount of channeled information coming from Pleiadians. Be very wary and mindful of any channeled information. It could be any number of these guys pretending to be this side. So just because it says Pleiadians and Sirians and Light Forces and Arcturians, it doesn't mean that they legitimately are, right? Then you've got the Sirian Blues. There's an activation that I do in the Lightning Path where I mentioned and I begin talking about the Sirian Blues, and then they come through, and with an activation I can't continue for a while because it just overwhelms me. But that's quite interesting. The Lemurians exist beneath Mount Shasta in California. They have done since the fall of Atlantis and Lemuria in the previous age, and many of them are still in the same bodies that they were wearing prior to the cataclysm. So 14,000 years old, 100,000 years old. A lot of them are very ancient beings. They are in contact with us. We've got the Arcturians. They're responsible for a lot of the crop circles that we see around the place. You've got the Ra Confederacy. That's not necessarily an image that matches. It's just something that I put in there to to show you something. I don't know what the beings there. The Azurites, the Ammonites. There's a few races. The Metagalactic Core, by the way, is in Dimension 8, the gold band. Then you've got the Avians, the blue Avians. Some people will be familiar with that. They've been communicating through Corey Good recently of Sphere Being Alliance. They're associated with the Law of One, at least David Wilcock believes so. You've got the Anuhazi, which is the Elohe Elohim race. That's a Christos founders race. You've got the Athean, and you've got a Cetacean founders Christos race as well, existing in these light fields. And they're just examples of light beings that are here to help, and they are also influences upon us, right? Gold triangle-headed beings, Corey Good talks about them. They're probably up there in the fifth harmonic somewhere. You got the Brino. When they take form, they don't usually have a form. They're normally vast fields of intelligent energy. They can take on any form they like. And then you have the various levels of ascended mastery. So you might have a gold flame master, for example, a Kuan Yin's a gold flame master, Saint Germain's a violet flame master. And then you've got Blu-ray masters. You've got Serapis Bey is the Cholhan of the fourth ray. This is the level when we're talking about ascended masters. It's people that have gone through the 15-dimensional time matrix and have gone into the sound field. They're existing in there as a cosmic ray, right? So that's just to give you a bit of an outline of all of the influences that are through the wavelength of light that we looked at to begin with. You see how we're tying this together? That's how they're influencing us. And so that can occur as a thought arising in your head. Don't ever think that it's your thought. We don't own any thoughts. There's fields of awareness, and our mind tunes into what is resonant, right? So you've got influences from here and influences from here. And what these guys are going to do is they're going to appeal to your sensory nature, aren't they? The self-destructive nature. What these guys are going to do are they're going to appeal to your self-regenerative nature. They're the balloon lifting you up. Is that making sense to everyone? We've still got everybody on the webinar, so I suppose it's we're finding it interesting. Justin's saying eloquent expansion, so it's hitting home well. It's fascinating, isn't it? So it's coming home crystal clear, says Tessa. I wanted to go over that contemporary science to begin with, so you can see that it's just not an abstract idea about non-local psychic influences. We've literally seen scientifically that consciousness can be carried through the medium of light, and that light as a wavelength is mapping the brain out into a particular structure, isn't it? So consider that in relation to your habits, your behavior, because here's the thing. This is so damn important to get, that these guys are always trying to drag you down, and they will appeal to your lower self-destructive nature. If you're not consciously present and directing your choices in an effective way that's going to regenerate your system, you'll fall back into your old patterns that have always been guided and directed by these influences, and you have never known it. You might feel a compulsion, I really want to go and eat that food. I know it's not good for me. I really feel like it. Damn, I'm going to go and do it. Right? It's not to say that you can't indulge. I'm just making an obvious example. You can do what you want, but at the end of the day, you've got to consider, is what I'm choosing now raising my vibration, or is it degrading it? Am I bringing my body closer to death, or am I elevating it into life? And what I've discovered over the years is that so much of the time, that compulsion, that willful feeling of need that goes toward the addictive self-destructive behavior, I check in on my energy field, I clear the entity that I identify in the energy field, and the craving goes away. And what does that tell you about where the craving is really coming from? Do you see how this takes place? And think about how many people don't even realize that there's an entity in their field. Any one of these entities is an incredibly powerful psychic being that can easily influence you and push you in a certain direction. Think about someone physically standing there. They can push you in a direction. These beings are able to push you mentally and emotionally in a certain direction. This is why it's critical that you can identify if there's an entity in your field and clear it. Yeah, Justin saying the Bhakti code is great for clearing this. Definitely. All right, so taking control of your destiny. So that being said, right, I hope that's crystal clear. I'm sure it is. We now understand the mechanism of how these beings influence us, and you've got to, I'm going over it again and again. I'm going over it slowly because you've really got to think about this, right? You've got to think about your day-to-day choices, because otherwise you will be directed like a remote control car by these beings. And how important is it that you fulfill the reason that you incarnated into this body in the first place? You have a soul mission to achieve, and if you are always caught up in self-indulgent activities, basically keeping you in your comfort zone, repeating your addictive compulsions, how is it that you're going to possibly arrive at your full potential? This is important, isn't it? All right, so this is how we do it, right? A little quick rundown of multidimensional anatomy to blow that up for you. So those life currents as a frequency are coming into your chakras, right? As mentioned, we gave a general depiction before. This is the graphic that's been given by the Guardian Alliance. By the way, the Guardian Alliance are these guys, okay? And I can give you the specific communication, who it was. The Voyager's books determines the particular race or races. For example, they'll say the Breno matrix. This is fifth harmonic. Them communicating. Does anyone want to know what they have to say? I want to know what they have to say. All right, so that's where the information's coming through. It might come through the Blue Sirians, for example, in D6, but it's being transmitted from here and here. Okay, I want to know what they have to say. So this is the information that they're giving us. This is your multidimensional anatomy. The light spectrum and the dimensional fields of consciousness are streaming into your body and mind through the chakra system and DNA, right? And so let's push that to the side for a moment. And streaming from the chakra system out into what's called your auric field, right? So from the auric field, that sets up the subtle magnetism that then brings forth the experiences in your life. They're not occurring by chance. You're attracting them, and you're attracting them according to your vibration, all right? So let's once more push that aside. I'm prepping you here to be able to utilize these skills. Here is the anatomy of your hands, energetic anatomy. Those are the dimensional fields flowing through the fingers. The other two are unified dimensions. They're the Hara dimensions 11 and 12. And the trifold flame of life comes straight down the middle and merges with the heart as well. So, of pertinence is your left hand here. I'm about to instruct you how you can feel these fields, these subtle energy fields. If you extend your hand out in front of you, place your forearm either on the chair, the side of the chair, or on top of your knee, as long as the palm is not touching anything. Try and relax your hand a little. And then just remember that your body is responding to your consciousness. So now set your intention, and you can say out loud or inside your head, connecting to my Christos avatar self now. All right, so that's you when you're the same as Jesus or Buddha. All right, notice that when you set that intention, you can feel, if you're paying attention to the feeling state and the vibrational pattern in your hand, that your fingers are starting to tingle a little bit. You might even feel that there's a kind of vibration or a subtle warmth in your palm. And if you're sensitive, you'll feel it as an actual magnetic field, a pulsing magnetic field in your hand. Now just notice the left hand is the magnetic hand, it's the receiver hand. That's why we're using the left hand. That's why most people are right-handed. Most people throw their right hand as the favorite punch. You know, we don't have too many southpaws out there. I don't know if in some anatomies it is the opposite, possibly. But this is the information, the way that it's been given. The left hand's the magnetic hand. So when you ask a question, you can receive an energetic response from your higher self in the form of quantum energy communication, in the form of magnetic waves, all right? Now, when we ask a question, what a yes answer, this is where we're breaking it down to something that's really simple. What a yes answer looks like, or feels like rather, is that you'll feel a pulse of magnetic energy move out the fingers and away from the body. Now, it might feel like a valve is opened up in the fingers and it's a flowing current of energy that just keeps flowing out the fingers. So it's an affirmative, isn't it? Remember we looked at the tubulins and there was a magnetic, or there was an electrical, there was a masculine or a feminine. That's a magnetic is a pulling toward you, isn't it? A magnetic is a forward, positive, yes, affirmative. All right, so if the magnetic field feels like it's moving toward your palm and even underneath the wrist, that's a no, all right? That's a negative if we're asking a question to the higher self. And when we move through energetic transmutations, you'll also feel that the magnetic field moves from the fingertips, a buzzing in the fingers, it moves toward the knuckles, underneath the palm, or you just feel like it subsides. So we're literally teaching you the basis through which you can perform quantum healings, most importantly on yourself. You can take control of your energy field. You can ask if there's an entity in your field. Is everybody really getting the gravity of how significantly empowering and important this is now, after we've just gone through scientifically validated how the non-local influences are actually derailing our life and we don't even know about it? It's pretty damn important, isn't it? So, that being said, let's do some energy field clearings and activations and put this into practice. What we might do is I'll just give you a minute or two if you need to go to the toilet before we get into this. And you know, if you've been here this long, I imagine you're pretty interested. I encourage you to stay for this practical component, because you can theorize about things as much as you want, but until you experience it, you don't know what's true, do you? So go off and take a minute or so or two to refresh yourself, stretch your legs, come back, and we're going to get into the energy work.